Yes.
So again, welcome everyone to our Global Minds Network webinar series on global innovation readiness. And today we will look at session 2 on leading global initiatives. And I will be presenting with David Ragland, my collaborator at Global Minds Network, a global innovation digital leader, and then myself, Karina Jensen, a founder and managing director. And we welcome guest speaker, transformation leader and CIO, Monica Maria Sanchez, who will give us fresh insights and her perspectives on leading global initiatives.
Thank you.
Greetings, everyone.
There we go. Okay, so as we take you on this journey, you may ask why global innovation readiness? And we really find that with the new dynamic, this changing world, and looking at how it's still very global, international, multicultural, it's digitally connected, and we see such interesting dynamics and opportunities. So we thought this is really timely to talk about how to prepare and innovate and collaborate in this changing world. So for the next 6 weeks, we will take you, or 5 weeks now, we'll take you on a journey to look at these aspects, from leading virtual teams to creating an innovation culture. And so we kicked off the webinar last Thursday, and today we'll look at leading global initiatives. And in the next few weeks, we'll take you through the innovation readiness journey to strategic coaching, virtual teams, innovation culture, and finally global transformation. So stay tuned. We're here every Thursday until June 25th. You can join us 8:30. We start 8:30 San Francisco, 11:30 New York City, and 5:30 here in Paris, and 9 o'clock in Bangalore, and very late over in Beijing, but hopefully 11:30. Hopefully a few of you will be able to stay up. So I see we have attendees from all over the world. And so we look forward to taking you on this journey, and just want to check in before we get started to make sure everybody's on board. So make sure you check out, since this is Zoom webinars, it's a bit different than Zoom meetings. So you have, I think, a very basic toolbar. So just check that out. Make sure you have, with your cursor, you can see on the bottom, you should have the Q&A feature where you can enter questions for us. And then there's a chat for introductions, comments, feedback. And so you have that as well on the right. So just make sure you check them out, you know where they are. And just to test the sound, and I'd like to ask everybody to type into the chat, say hello, and share greeting in your local language. I'll say bonjour from Paris, from France. We'd like to hear back from you. Where are you calling in from? See a few in the chat. Hello, everybody. Are you out there?
Paris, oui.
Yeah. Ah, we see Paris. Bonjour, depuis Paris. Ah, a lot of fellow Parisians. Lake Tahoe. Wow. Okay, nice. California. Stockholm. Very nice. Ah, UK. Hello, Karin from Stockholm. It's good to see you. And Fleming from Copenhagen. Great to see you too, Fleming. Okay. And many more. Thierry, Edgar, hello, bonjour. Okay, good. See, everybody's on board. Now, is the sound okay? Can everybody let me know? You can hear me loud and clear. Just say a quick yes or no. Okay, good. We're on board. Sound is fine. We're ready to go. Excellent. Okay, so you'll be muted during the presentation session. You should have the opportunity to unmute yourself once we open up for the Q&A and exchange. Or you can even open up your video if you want to ask in video or audio mode. It's up to you. And please feel free. We want to hear from you, so share your questions and feedback during the presentation as well as after. Because this is what we like most, is really to create an exchange. Okay, so I will get started here, and going to talk a bit about Global Minds Network very quickly. Who are we? Our vision is really to power global minds to collaborate and innovate in order to transform the world. And we would like to do so by facilitating global innovation and collaboration in order to accelerate innovation performance, as well as organization performance and international market success. And our team is an international advisory network. So we're a team of collaborators, international leaders, change makers, innovators who have extensive international experience at the cross-section of global innovation, leadership, multicultural collaboration, and digital transformation. And we're really motivated by this wonderful dynamic world that we find ourselves in. We don't see the challenges, we see the opportunities. Because what we're finding now is we see a world that's more connected than ever. It's interdependent. There's really the collective wisdom, the cultural diversity around the world that's still driven by international dynamics and more so by digitally connected environment. And so this is what we'd like to speak to and look at how can we create more opportunities moving forward. And we do so through this Global Innovation Readiness Framework, which represents a decade of research and speaks to research done within this complex world with leaders and organizations who are very international, leading across functions and cultures, digitally connected, tech-driven organizations, so complex environments. And this research has really shown us what it takes to lead in this environment that we find ourselves in today. And really, it's about 3 success levers. It's around vision, developing a global compelling vision through inclusive leadership and strategic co-creation, which shapes the dialogue within the organization, creating a dialogue that where every voice is heard, really, and that where you can facilitate knowledge sharing and cross-cultural learning. And that in turn shapes the space, the virtual as well as the physical space today, and looking at how to nurture global innovation culture and develop a creative team climate where everyone can thrive. And so we see that as this continuous cycle as new initiatives, global initiatives are created through ideation, co-creation, through strategic planning, and onto the market, onto execution for high performance. And so what moving forward and really looking at leading global initiatives, there are 3 trends or movements that we find particularly important, or that I've found as well in, and I'd like to point to those. And these are just some findings from research done with global executives, but I'd like to point to these 3 movements because they speak to our current world. And one is looking at this dynamic of digital savviness and looking at the ability of leaders to navigate this digital world. And the global executive study at MIT, most recently from January of this year, showed that less than 10% of global executives agree their organization has leaders with the skills needed to thrive in a digital economy. And that's a big concern. So there's a need to pay attention to the area of digital movement or trend is around how organizations are forming, which we especially see now during and after the or during this pandemic, is looking at how more and more organizations are becoming team and project driven. And Deloitte has shown this through their past studies to look at this younger generation, globally diverse leaders who are more and more in tune with driving their projects through teams. And so we see these organic networks forming. And then the final movement or trend is really around global leadership development and the need to still pay attention to how leaders can navigate across cultures, as well as lead across generations, while fostering or nurturing creativity and innovation. And this is what we'd like to speak to in the current environment. And to do that, you really have to look at the global leadership journey and where development is heading today. there's so much attention paid on more and more on leadership development, and it's important to look at the 4 layers that will influence our current and future leaders. And at the core, we see for development, it's really the sense of developing emotional intelligence, but also your core values as a leader, looking at what are the models and frameworks that will form a leader's ethos, or really their critical values. And we see that through various models, and very popular models through values-driven leadership, trust-driven, we have servant-driven. We see many forms who are really moving towards this transformational type of leadership that's more collective and can inspire the team and inspire collaboration. And as the leader moves forward in his or her journey, leading across the world, we see these cultural challenges and similarities as well as differences. And their cultural dimension models come in, which we have we're aware of, have been working with this for years, since the 1960s, since Hall, since Hofstede, since Trompenaars, and most recently Meyer. These are cultural or country scales, where we've studied, it's a foundation where you start your journey and to understand what are these cultural differences and across countries. So it's a nice foundation, and all of us have been through that journey. However, as we've noticed, the more dynamic the world has become, the more collaborative and team-driven, we need to look at cultural interactions, because we have to respond in the moment. We're working with teams globally who sometimes come from 2 cultures or have lived in several cultures. And so it's really about responding to them through cultural interactions. So developing the sense of cultural intelligence and global mindset, being very aware of bringing that knowledge of culture into play, but also being mindful and looking at how do you respond in the moment. And this is really, which takes us to the final layer of today, and where we have limited research and we don't see this practiced as often within organization. And this is global innovation context. So how are we developing leaders who can truly be successful in the current environment? So bring in that cultural knowledge, however, apply it to the current context of an environment where innovation is really front and center, but it's in an environment that's still highly international, cross-cultural, and digitally connected. And there, we'd like to introduce this global innovation leadership model, and through research that's been done in this environment. So truly looking at those dynamics, we've found that there are particular behaviors that leaders need to adapt in moving through this innovation cycle. So as we look at this team and project-driven environment, it's very international and connected, digitally connected. It's important to look at the cycle of how we do stuff. I think we need to close the microphone. I think there are 2 windows open. I think, yeah, there you go, thank you. And so I think there's another window. Monica, you may want to, you have 2 windows open, so you may want to close the microphone so it doesn't echo. Yeah, there we go, thanks. And so as we move through this cycle, looking at the leader and adapting those behaviors, that there more attention needs to be paid to how leaders will adopt those empowering behaviors through strategic co-creation, inspiring teams around the world, inviting them to bring forth their ideas and to initiate. And that also brings you further to the strategic planning, to look at strategic co-creation and looking at how leaders can use inclusive behaviors to integrate critical knowledge that's important from local markets, and in how they're able to transfer that knowledge or learn from their local teams around the world. And then further moving to the validation phase and building a sound business case, how leaders are using decisive behaviors to use their analytical capabilities, to integrate critical data and knowledge in order to build a business case that truly represents team members or their markets around the world. And then finally, looking at how to develop those communicative behaviors for execution. So now it's time to execute, and the leader will need to look at, well, how can I facilitate continuous knowledge sharing and learning from my teams around the world? Because we need to be close to the market, we need to be responsive to changes from customers, and so looking at all the way until execution, how to make that happen. So if we look at these behaviors in the cycle and how leaders continuously need to be more adaptive and more visionary, two roles are coming into play. And that was where we see leaders more as knowledge facilitators and innovation orchestrators. And the leader more and more is taking the role of a knowledge facilitator through this global project and team-driven environment where the leader increasingly needs to co-create this vision, to inspire creative thinking from diverse team members around the world. And in that process, to build trust and build positive relationships that again will nurture more knowledge sharing and continuous exchange. To nurture innovation and facilitate that collaboration. So the leaders knowledge facilitator is really connecting the global network. And in doing so, it will be also important to look at that execution side, how the leader not only is facilitating that knowledge, but also orchestrating that innovation process and developing a sound business case that's, again, truly representative of the different regions or countries. And so in that process, integrating that local market intelligence and ensuring market and sales readiness. So when you're ready to go, when you're ready to execute, are all marketing and sales teams ready around the world? Are they knowledgeable? Are they trained? Do they have the resources and support to be successful? And so the leader really needs to ensure that he or she drives successful execution. So in exploring this, what I found through my global study is that there are really three critical mindsets that come to play, that shape that behavior, that shape the skills, and I'll mention those here. And the first is creative mind. So the leader who can truly nurture creativity for him or herself, starts with the leader, of course, to have time to reflect, to draw from imagination, to be inspired, and then in turn inspire others. So that develops empowering behaviors and inviting others to co-create and to co-creating a compelling vision and truly inspiring teams across functions, across cultures. It also points to being a critical thinker. So having this mindset of thinking critically or being really questioning and challenging the behaviors of a knowledge integrator. So really having a sound analytical abilities to understand what is important, what is the data we need to integrate, what is the knowledge that is needed from our local teams, in order to create a successful strategy, but in the process, how to use a problem-solving process to truly understand the customer's problems and how to convert those into successful solutions. And the third area is then the collaborator, looking at how to apply communicative behaviors. And more, we've heard a lot about leaders who need to be more inclusive, or we're starting to hear more. And this is really about collaboration skills, using communicative behaviors to listen and to be open to the teams, to be a continuous learner, learning through the teams and being open to other perspectives. And in the process, developing strong relationships with their teams around the world. And that shapes, I would call an inclusive dialogue. And so as leaders, as these global leaders are becoming more, developing, nurturing their creativity and their critical thinking, and also their inclusive behaviors, what comes to play is at the core of that is really shaping an inclusive dialogue for their teams. And that starts with listening. It may seem very simple, active listening, and the art of active listening does wonders, especially across cultures. And this I found through research in Asia, Europe, and Americas. Across cultures, listening is so critical, and active listening, really paying attention to your team's needs and wants and interests, and creating a dialogue where you can bring that forth, where they feel safe to share and where they're inspired to propose new ideas. But it's not just about listening, because I've seen great leaders who can be great listeners, but then they walk away and they don't follow up. That can really impact trust, can destroy trust. It can limit team members from sharing in the future. So what is important for leaders is to understand the sense of inclusive dialogue, not only to promote active listening, but also how they respond to those conversations and how they follow up. How do they ensure that the support and resources are there for their leaders, or how do they ensure that they can bring forth solutions that will help them thrive, or for their local teams. So it's about active listening, it's about being responsive and supportive, and through framing the feedback, framing it in a positive manner, but also constructive way, looking at facilitation skills to facilitate that inclusive dialogue, and also bringing that back to the digital connection. It starts with social networking within the organization. How can a leader promote conversations across the digital platform, the internal platform? How can you connect your teams around the world through the platform or digital tools that can start those conversations and create those relationships, and then promote more knowledge sharing? And then how, does the leader then capture that knowledge, and how can the teams apply that knowledge and learn from it? So continuous learning. So the learning in turn applies to successful solutions and happy customers around the world. So if we look at that very quickly in practice, I'll mention a few organizations, primarily from research, a few from our collaborations. Airbnb, very quickly, Airbnb, which many of these organizations are challenged, like everyone today. However, their innovative practices will also help shape their future. And I'd like to mention one from Airbnb, which they've been practicing for a few years now. And I think this is really going to help them moving forward too. And that's the sense of they're using their virtual platforms in ways to create an inclusive community, their global community from all offices around the world. And they will share local customer stories. So every meeting, they'll encourage their local teams to share success stories, what they've learned from the market. And in that sense, they can start creating synergies. They can see, this is interesting. Maybe we could use this in India or Sweden or France or in the US. So looking at those synergies, even promoting exchanges. But most important, looking at how to create virtual stories and share knowledge. Siemens has been developing a platform for the past few years now, and it's become a very powerful platform where they've really helped encourage team members from the different regions to initiate their own content and share their own stories, and to teach each other their own knowledge, and make it a more dynamic platform and a learning community in that sense. TCS, Tata Consulting Services, has really perfected this. So they are a consulting organization, and they're fascinating because they've really harnessed the collective wisdom around the world, and they do that through a methodology. They've captured that. They encourage every team around the world to contribute knowledge, and then they're able to do that through their platforms and tools, as well as process. So they have these dynamic flows, knowledge flows, where through every phase of the project, teams are encouraged to share. Finally, I'll mention very quickly Xiaomi in China. I had a chance to interview their team with a co-founder. in Beijing last October. And it's fascinating to see Xiaomi's rise as a global player. And it's largely due to their success as being able to connect to the local talent. And what they do every time when they're developing the local customer markets, they really give a lot of freedom to their local teams and listen and learn and really help support them in that growth. And so that's really helped them become successful in that manner. So if we look at this, looking at the role of the leaders becoming knowledge facilitators and innovation orchestrators in this very dynamic and connected world, I will leave you with a quote that has inspired me for years, and I think it rings true, especially today. It sounds better in French. Le véritable voyage de découverte ne consiste pas à chercher de nouveaux paysages, mais à voir de nouveaux yeux. The real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes, by Marcel Proust. And I think that's very important for us to keep in mind, is how leaders will develop those new eyes, those new perspectives, and especially leading into the future and looking at the impact of new technologies. And here I'd like to invite my colleague, Dr. David Ragland, a global innovation and digital leader, to share his perspective on this role. David, I think you need to unmute.
Merci. Sorry about that. Magnifique, Karina. Merci. Bonjour à tous. That's as far as I'm going to go in French. I will not torture everyone. So as a compliment to all of the wonderful people, process, and behavioral aspects of global leadership that Karina just highlighted, we thought it would be fun, or at least interesting, hopefully, to have a brief discussion on the role of technology, specifically in the domain of global leadership. So, you know, this is not something that you know, we're all very acutely aware of how technology is impacting our lives and changing our world of work. So I'm not likely to share anything new or novel with you, but we wanted to just kind of put a spotlight specifically on the domain of leadership. I have had a 30+ year career in technology, but despite all of that, I am by no means an expert in the areas of artificial intelligence or machine learning or IoT or predictive analytics. In fact, I worked with a lady at Salesforce, one of my last companies, who had a PhD in artificial intelligence, and I quickly learned how little I knew. But what I do have is a very natural curiosity about the ways that technology is changing our society and our ways of working and how we collaborate and how we do all of the things that Karina just highlighted in her section. And if you'll extend me just a little bit of latitude, there are a couple of things that I like to use to take a look at where where technology has gone historically over the last couple of decades. We're all aware of it. This is nothing new, but sometimes I'm so overwhelmed by all the changes that it's, you know, it's hard to see them unless we have some way of measuring these changes. We live in a world where this is all normalized. But if you'll allow me, I like to look at a couple of things. One is Moore's Law, which no doubt most of you are well aware of. Gordon Moore developed this in 1965. He's the co-founder and former CEO of Intel. And I find it just absolutely fascinating. You know, he revised this theory in 1975, and it basically postulates that every 2 years, the number of transistors that will fit on a microchip will double. And what blows my mind a bit is that since 1975, this has held true. So here we are in 2020, and every 2 years, the number of transistors has doubled on a microchip. And it's interesting to think that the Apollo 11 moonshot had well, currently an iPhone has about 100,000 times the amount of processing power that the Apollo moonshot had. So there's some evidence that Moore's law is starting to slow down, but we're going to start to see all kinds of things that we can't even imagine. There's experimentation underway to have storage in subatomic particles, and this gets far beyond anything I understand, so I won't go into it. But it is interesting to take a look at that. I also want to emphasize real quickly that I take a very positive view of technology and all the wonderful things it can do for us. I don't take a Terminator view or a Ex Machina or a Westworld view, like some science fiction writers take. I see all of the changes as being very positive. But as another quick way to kind of highlight where we've been and where we are, I like to just very quickly look at the game of chess. I use it as a measuring stick. Many of you will remember that 20 years ago, there was this famous match between Garry Kasparov, the world reigning chess champion at the time, and IBM's Deep Blue. And I think out of 6 games, it was the first time that a algorithm-driven chess platform beat a grandmaster. And it was kind of an eye-opening moment. But if we flash forward 20 years, we now have a very advanced platform called Stockfish 8. And there was another famous match between Stockfish 8, which is an open source chess platform that is developed by people all over the world. And it had a match with a program developed by DeepMinds, and it's owned by Alphabet or Google, and it's called AlphaZero. Now, AlphaZero taught itself the game of chess. It's completely driven by machine learning, so it wasn't open source. It played and taught itself the game of chess for 9 hours. After 4 hours, it was on par with Stockfish 8. They played 100 games. AlphaZero won 28 and it tied 72. So it just kind of gives us a glimpse of where machine learning is and where it's taking us. Again, I see these as all very positive changes, but I think it's human nature to sometimes view these things negatively. I don't. I see some very positive things. And as we look at where we've been and where we are, it's very hard to predict the future because, we can't predict where the next frame-breaking change will disrupt an entire industry or change our lives. But I think one thing is very clear. Humans are inextricably intertwined with technology and with machines. And that's the one constant. I sometimes get to teach a class at George Washington University for graduating seniors, and on the future world of work and what they're entering into. And I always get, in some form or another, one consistent question: what is the #1 skill that they're going to need as they enter their workforce? And my answer immediately is adaptability and flexibility, and the ability to be able to leverage all of the changes that are coming in terms of artificial intelligence and machine learning. And I think it's going to be a wonderful thing. So far, I know technologists talk about, or futurists talk about, 3 stages of artificial intelligence. The age we're living in now, where really artificial intelligence is just very good at processing single tasks or combing through data and spotting patterns and et cetera. Some futurists talk about artificial general intelligence and artificial superintelligence, but that gets into something I don't understand, and I don't think that's in our immediate headlights. So the #1 thing is just embracing technology and learning to be adaptable and flexible. And there's a famous quote in systems theory that's there on the left: any system of humans and machines, the element with the greatest flexibility will control the entire system. And I think that strikes a chord with me, because I think that's the main message for humans. I think that we will not be replaced. I don't think a single line of code is ever going to replace a human's capacity for judgment and empathy and emotional intelligence and developing strategy and making sound decisions. I think that our jobs will change. My experience with my last company, Salesforce, we were working with clients around the world to leverage the latest digital transformation changes. And we did see that we were changing a lot of the activities that humans perform, but we weren't replacing entire jobs. In essence, we were allowing people to become more high touch with their clients and with their stakeholders. I see technology as freeing us up to be more human, to focus on all of these things that are listed there. More adaptable, more flexible, empowering others, developing our skills with emotional intelligence. I think self-awareness and being able to build relationships with other humans is going to be the hallmark of successful global leaders. And sometimes I don't like to use the word leader. I like to use the word facilitator, because I think leaders are going to come from all levels. They are coming from all levels. And particularly as we look at global innovation and working across cultures and time and space and national boundaries, I think that all of these very human skills are going to be what determines success. And then on the final slide, I think, is there another slide, Karina, after this one? Yeah. So it's just, this just sort of brings home that entire point that I was pointing to, that understanding ourselves and others and knowing how to unlock the potential of globally diverse teams is really the key to the future. So I see technology augmenting our ability to do that, not inhibiting it. So we just wanted to give that brief view on leadership.
Thank you, David. And that brings us to our speaker, Monica Maria Sanchez. So we're excited to welcome you as a transformation leader, executive VP and CIO. She brings a wealth of experience, and I'll let David introduce her, since I know you.
Yes, thanks. I'm sorry, I was, yeah. Yeah, so Monica and I have known each other for years. We worked together at a large global organization. Monica is an extremely accomplished leader, global leader. She's been a chief information officer and a technology leader for many years. And I have benefited from watching her leadership in action. So I'm just very excited to introduce Monica this morning to everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Karina and David. I'm so happy to be here with you guys and just participating in the process of creating new ideas. Thank you.
Thank you. And so we're going to have an informal conversation with Monica, and to really have this nice exchange, and then we're going to open it up to everyone. So think about questions that you'd like to ask Monica or all of us, because we welcome your comments and feedback as well. So Monica, with I'm very curious, because you have had this extensive experience in leading teams and transforming organizations around the world. And I'd like to know your thoughts about the leader as a knowledge facilitator and innovation orchestrator. What is your perspective there? What do you think is?
I totally agree with your appreciation of what your research and your observations showed along this time that you have devoted to analyzing the topic. I would say that knowledge is not something that the leader owns by himself. I believe that collective knowledge, collective intelligence is what we need to address the present problems that we are dealing, the challenges that we are dealing nowadays. We are part of global organizations or regional organizations or localized companies that are changing constantly. So There is some kind of idea, at least in regions that I have been participating, that the leader needs to bring all the answers to all the questions, or at least they should know how to fix stuff. And there is some arrogance on that approach, because the leader might have had the opportunity to go to universities or been exposed to things, but sometimes in global settings, you don't know what those communities, what those business units are dealing with, how those markets look like, which are their preferences, which are the specific things that resonate for that culture that perhaps you are not aware. So we as the leaders sometimes have blind spots, and we need to open the door to understand what's going on. Not to say this is the answer, now I understand what's going on, this is the answer, but rather to say what you guys as a team think is going on. What do you think, guys, the priority is? But from a humble perspective, understanding that the challenge might be overwhelming and that the collective intelligence is going to be the source, the vessel, where we should all go to look at different perspectives, and from there, just bring ideas that could work or not. That is another aspect, right? To feel comfortable about trying, not being 100% certain that it's going to work. And if it doesn't, and we have the ability to look at the reality, that what is coming to the experience by moment, every moment, we will see that perhaps we need to make some changes, and that is perfectly good. It's part of the experience of learning for the team. It's part of the wisdom of understanding and interpreting what is going on, and just keeping flexible, as David was saying, right? That is, uncertainty is for granted. So the actions, we take actions that depends on the circumstances, that depends on the need of the moment. The consequences we can never control. There are so many variables that are out of control. So in that context, I think the most important thing is to be honest about the motive. What we're intending to do honestly? Is this a selfish purpose? Is it the collective purpose? Is it something that we are doing for the organization? Are we be blinded by our egos? So those are the introspection things that are important to be going inside to figure out, where are we at? What are we trying to address here?
That's great insights. Thank you. David, do you have a question? Or?
David, do you have any question?
Yeah, so Monica, just following up on that, that's, that goes right to the crux of everything that we're, that we're trying to communicate in terms of global leadership. It has elements of humility, it has introspection, inclusion, all of these wonderful things. I know that you and I worked at a very large global organization where there were so many competing agendas. We had objectives in the region in which we worked, which was Latin America, and we were very in tune with what the local market needs required and what they were looking for and what was required to be successful. Yet at the time, and I'm not saying one way is good or other, there were global standards that were being implemented. And in one sense, they made a lot of sense, but they didn't make sense at the local market. And so you were very much in the middle of all of that, having to negotiate those competing agendas globally and across cultures and, different understandings of how things should be. And, one of the many reasons I wanted to invite you today is you did such a good job of doing that. Do you have any advice on, sometimes I looked at the situations that we were both in and I thought, wow, this is an immovable object pitted against an unstoppable force. There's no way to win, but you did it. Any insights on how to do that? Because I think we all run into that globally.
I think Patience is the first thing that I would recommend.
Yeah.
Because this is a journey for everybody in the organization. When we are dealing with complicated agendas and different things that different people want, it's hard to make everybody come to the same vision, to the same channel, to be all connected to the same purpose. Because it's too big, it's too wide, there are so many mindsets and worldviews that you cannot solve everything. So I would say that an important role for the leader is to bring clarity. So when the things get tough, because intellectually we all understand what we are discussing here, right? We get it. But when we go back to the office, then you start finding what you mentioned, right? The reality. So clarity is one thing that is important, because when you bring everybody to the room and you start the conversation to figure out, well, what are we dealing with here? What is the problem that we are trying to solve? So everybody starts thinking and tuning to that concept that is the real problem, the root cause that we are trying to address. So we eliminate everything that goes around the symptoms, but go deeper with the questioning and reviewing, and dealing with conflicts is also an important thing that that needs to be learned, because when the conflict is not well handled, you create a lot of energy disruption. I mean, there is a lot of energy spent on defending, justifying, and not on solving things and working on the resolution of things. So I think that trying to help the team deal with conflict healthily is an important part, because we can learn from conflict, but we can also get out hurt, badly hurt of it. And if we do that, then something is broken forever. And when you have to deal with a problem that you need to solve with the same team, something has been broken already, and you need to go back to fix that to make the energy flow easily. So in my experience, I would say that managing conflict is important, and making people comfortable with just understand that we are not perfect. We are trying to find a good solution for something, that the intention is good, there is something good and noble behind the effort, and we can make mistakes, and we learn from it, and we move forward. I know it sounds like a fairy tale, but on the shop floor, sometimes you just need to stop and say, hey guys, wait a moment, we are dealing with this problem. It has nothing to do with what we are discussing. When you have a meeting with 20 people trying to say something or defend themselves or just cover some error, it's hard to work on a solution, because everybody is just super protective and defensive and in fear. There is no way to create anything from there. So just relax. We have a problem. Let's keep the personal things aside and focus on what the issue is.
Yeah, great answer.
I think that we as leaders would do something positive for ourselves and for others, starting to look at how we react to things, which are the fears that trigger our emotions, which are the things that activate our passions and make us feel joyful and make sense. The dynamic of the team is also important, that we keep reading. How is it going? How teams are feeling? Are everybody having the space to express themselves positively, or perhaps there are some that are more extrovert and are inhibiting the opportunity for the introvert to say something that is meaningful but has no space to do that, and we need to create as accompagnateur, I would say in French. like to hold the space for everybody to have a voice and an opinion about what's going on. I have an anecdote of a friend of mine that he was trying to help Latin American communities with a problem in a village that didn't have water. So this guy, this friend of mine with others, they were technologists. So they were trying to find a technology-based solution to a problem for that community. And they were dealing with a hairy problem because there was something that they didn't find a clue how to fix it. And they were trying to do it isolated, the scientists together trying to figure it out. When they got tired about trying, so what they did is they invited some people from the community. The community members are not literate people, they have not gone to the university, but they have been dealing with that environment. They have been exposed to the problem for years. So when they brought the problem and say, hey guys, this is the problem that we are trying to fix, they easily and naturally came with an answer that they would have never been able to imagine. And you say, why is that? Here we have all the knowledge, but here we have the experience, the sense of what's going on and how they have been dealing to overcome that problem manually, perhaps year over year. So the beauty of coming as a community, as a group of minds working together, no matter the background, no matter the studies, how literally we can all contribute. It's a matter of opening to the possibility of co-creating, as Karina was saying, something that in the isolation of our lab, perhaps we would never imagine that. Right. Because we were not exposed to those experiences before.
Yeah, I think, you know, you start with the end in mind and work backwards, but if you can get this common end game clarity, and I can say as a technologist, I was very guilty, particularly early in my career, of having solutions looking for problems. So I wasn't really listening to the business community. I wasn't really listening, you know, to what needed. I had this thing that I, you know, wanted to, and it took a while to realize, wait a minute, I'm here to support them, not the, you know, it's typical in our profession sometimes because we've spent so much time coming up with this solution and we just want to, so it was an eye-opener. Yeah, I think it supports what you're saying. If we can listen and be introspective and inclusion and figure out what this end game is and unite around this collective vision.
Thank you so much for your insights, Monica. And we have a few questions. We only have a few minutes, so I just want to make sure we have some time to answer the questions. One from Edgar Bello. How can a team successfully work with brutal leadership who believes he is the owner of knowledge?
Oh my gosh.
I know we've all seen this type of leader or experienced this type of leader, and looking at, and I have a few more questions for you after that, but looking at more the autocratic leaders, we say, or who, and I think also that is different across cultures, how you view the power of the leader. You know, is it about the team having the power, collective wisdom, or it's about the leader? And I think, from my perspective in research, this really comes from behavioral change. Is it possible for this leader to develop that behavioral change and have that awakening, you know, to bring that leader to show the impact on performance, for the leader to see other role models or other leaders who are being very successful in inclusion and facilitating that knowledge, and for that leader to, you know, observe and learn. And if that leader is not open to learning or knowledge sharing, then you know, then it's not possible. Then you really need to look to other leadership or other leaders to protect, that are close to the team, that can protect the team and nurture better practices. That's my thoughts. I don't know if any other.
I would like to add something to that. That is the fact that it was useful for me when I found those kind of leaderships in my career, is to understand that the other person is not the enemy. Number one thing is just they're bringing some kind of unresolved conflict to the workplace, and they are translating that style to the teams and their own fears and their own patterns of control that is basically all based on fear. So I had to deal with some narcissist leaders. I reported to them. And it was good for me just to have a compassionate conversation with a person from a place where perhaps not speaking directly, saying, I know where you're coming from, you are a narcissist. No, you don't say that. But yeah, you understand where the person is coming, and you try to establish a conversation to work together with that person in a positive way, through dialogue, through conversations. That may be one thing. It might not work because the person might listen but cannot get rid of the pattern. So perhaps some of the conversations might help, like asking for advice in HR, asking for advice to other leaders to see how they are coping with the situation. Perhaps you are not the only one person that is being subject to the attacks or the mistreatment. So those are things that could be tried as well.
Yeah. We have a quick last question about intergenerational leadership. So Thierry Doyen asked about how do we keep up with the younger generation in terms of what kinds of tools should we be using and social media to ensure everybody can collaborate equally and successfully. My experience has been around the best way to do that is to choose 3 key tools, one around collaboration, the other one around communication, knowledge sharing, and the final around project management. And to ensure everybody embraces that, younger and older. And that also I found younger generations very eager to introduce new ways, innovative ways that the older generation can learn from as well. But that's my quick thought. David, do you have maybe?
Well, yeah, I would just quickly share, I teach part-time at a university, and I teach project management and organizational leadership. But in the field of project management, we're seeing some wonderful changes in artificial intelligence. Where 20 years ago I had to sit and design a project schedule and et cetera, and we're seeing that it's hard to keep up with these changes, but we're seeing wonderful opportunities in that field for actionable insights, and you can now use artificial intelligence to really look at past projects and figure out what worked and what didn't work. And these platforms can do this much more effectively than the human mind. They can look at just tons of data and bring back patterns. They can look for patterns and say, well, I know you're worried about scope and schedule, but guess what? When we did that last time, we ended up, when we adhered to that, we ended up with a subpar product. So how do you keep up with that? It is hard because it's moving so fast, but just looking at technology within a particular domain like project management, I read various industry articles and things that can keep you informed, but they're out there, and it's just changing all the time. I don't know if that addresses the question.
Okay. No, I think that addresses it very well. We are on top of the hour, so I want to be mindful of everybody's time. And before you leave, just a reminder and just a few words. Hold on for just one moment before we say goodbye to everybody. And that would be we would like to point to very quickly how we enjoy co-creating global solutions. So looking at our vision too in terms of global innovation readiness, and want to mention that we not only deliver audits and talks and training seminars, but we really look at how to co-create with you in order to shape that vision, dialogue, and space. So keep in touch. You can contact, you have my contact information here. You can stay updated. Follow us on the LinkedIn page. More resources, the Leading Global Innovation book, and a readiness test drive. And a reminder for next week, we look forward to our next stop on strategic co-creation, where my colleagues Lokesh Venkataswamy and Kai-Ming Wang will welcome guest speaker Kurt Ward, Global Design Director at Philips. So it should be a very exciting session. You can sign up, you've got the link there. And a final big thank you to Monica Maria Sanchez for your wisdom and wonderful insights. And a big thank you, merci to my colleague David Ragland for giving us a sneak peek at the future of global leadership. So thank you, everyone. We look forward to seeing you next Thursday, and stay safe and have a wonderful weekend ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Karina. Thank you, David. Bye-bye.
Bye.